Hello, my name is Aviva, and today I'm going to be sharing with you popular books and my opinions on them. So I asked all of my Instagram followers to let me know which books they see on their feeds all the time, and you guys definitely delivered. I got so many responses, and I was actually very happy to see that all of the responses were basically the same thing, which really means that all of these books are very popular. I was a little bit nervous to go off just my feed because obviously everybody's got different feeds going on, but happens to be everything that everybody commented, I happen to see on my feeds all of the time too. So I didn't really feel like, taking some stuff out, but there was a very long list. So I decided to instead split this video up into two. So today we're going to be talking about just romance books, and then I'm going to make a part 2 of this a little bit later, and we're going to talk about fantasy books. So with that said, make sure you're subscribed to my channel so that you can get notified when the fantasy version of this video comes out. Also give this video a like while you're down there. But either way, with that said, let's get started. The first books that I wanted to talk about is Colleen Hoover books. So a lot of people just said like Colleen Hoover in general, but also a lot of people like mentioned It Ends With Us or like Ugly Love or, some of her very, very popular books. So first up, I've only read 3 books by her. I kind of decided to like give her a shot around this time last year. And I read Maybe Someday, and then I read November 9, and then I read Ugly Love. And I'm not gonna lie, as I read them, I very much enjoyed the read. Like her writing is very like easy to consume, and like I was definitely pulled into all of those books and kept wanting to flip the page. But at the end of the day, Colleen Hoover just likes writing about certain stuff that kind of get to me. Like I don't really like reading about cheating, and she loves putting cheating into her books. She also just writes in a certain way where it's like, I just don't really want to put myself through that. Like there's always a twist at the end that is gonna like either blow your mind or make you uncomfortable or be like, what the hell just happened? You know what I mean? And I just don't really enjoy reading books like that. So therefore, I kind of decided to like stop reading her after I read the first 3 books that I did read by her, and I don't really regret that decision. Like I know that a lot of people enjoy her books, but and also a big thing about her is that sometimes her books are not 100% romance. Like sometimes they're like women's fiction or like other things. Like It Ends With Us is not supposedly not a romance book. Like it's watching a girl be in like an abusive relationship or something like that, and then there's like somewhat of a romance happening on the side, and like I just don't really care for those type of books. So therefore, Colleen Hoover and me, like we just don't get along super well. But like I understand why people like her books. I just don't like them personally. You know what I mean? But either way, next up, a lot of people also mention Taylor Jenkins Reid. So happens to be, I do own 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but I really don't know why I own it. Also, is Daisy Jones and the Six written by her? Because if it is, then I own that too. And again, I have not read that. So I've never read a Taylor Jenkins Reid's book. And even though I do own, I think 1 or 2 of her books, I really have no interest in reading her for some reason. Like I know that a lot of people like her books, but again, she does like writing about cheating, which I'm not really a big fan of. And also her books, supposedly, I've heard this from other people, that her books are a little bit more of like fiction with romances going on. And again, that is just not my type of vibe. So unfortunately, I'm not so into her, and therefore I have never read any of her books. And I honestly doubt I will read any of hers in the future, even though I own 2, but let's not talk about that. But either way, third most popular that people kept mentioning was Lauren Asher books. So I happen to have read every single one of her books that I'm aware of, besides for the last book in the Dirty Air series. So I've read the first 3 books in that series, and then I also read The Fine Print and Terms and Conditions. And I'm not gonna lie, I really, really enjoy those books. I definitely see why people like raving about them. They're kind of like the Offcampus series, which was another series that a lot of people said is on their feed all the time, which I definitely stand by, but we'll get to that in a second. But either way, Lauren Asher books, I enjoy her books. I don't think that all of them are very 5-star material. Like I happen to think that The Fine Print and Terms and Conditions were like her best work, but that makes sense because like the Dirty Air series came before, so like her writing just gets better as it goes. So I would say that if you've never read a Lauren Asher book, I would highly recommend reading Terms and Conditions and The Fine Print. And then if you very much like that, you could read, the Dirty Air series. But happens to be the Dirty Air series is like somewhat mentioned in her next series. So like what I'm basically trying to say is that I like her books, and I would definitely recommend reading them, even though they're not all like, top tier material, but they're all like a really solid time. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. So yeah, Lauren Asher gets a thumbs up from me. Next up, a lot of people said Mariana Zapata books, which I was honestly very surprised about because like I personally never, ever, ever see Mariana Zapata really on my feed very much. Like, I see a couple of people here and there, but like, if you would ask me about a popular book, Mariana Zapata would not be something that like came up in my head. And it's very funny because Mariana Zapata is one of my favorite, authors of all time. And I like putting her on my feed as often as I can because I want to hype her up, so freaking much. But it's funny that people said it because I personally never see that on my feed. But I 100% recommend Mariana Zapata. I've read like 8 books by her and every single one of them have gotten a 5 stars. So if you have not read one by her yet, please do. But next up, a lot of people also mentioned Emily Henry's books. So that is People We Meet on Vacation, Beach Read, and then Book Lovers. And I have read Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation, and I was very disappointed by both of them. So first up, I did read Beach Read before it was like extremely popular, and I thought that it was an okay time, but it didn't 100% work for me because it was another one of those books where it was kind of like women's fiction with a side of romance. And I didn't even think that the romance was like that amazing. So therefore I was just like okay about it. Like I didn't think it was horrible. But then when I picked up People We Meet on Vacation, I was extremely disappointed. First of all, I'm not a big fan of dual timelines. Second of all, I'm not a big fan of second chance romance-esque books. So those were 2 of the main reasons why that book didn't work for me. But then on top of that, the whole thing with like dual timelines usually is that there's something that both of the characters know, but you don't know, and you have to wait until the end to find it out. And in this book specifically, when we found it out at the end, I thought that it was so freaking anticlimactic that I'm like, why the hell did I read this entire book? Like, I was not enjoying it. I was waiting to see what was up with it that made these 2 characters not talk for a little bit. And then when we got to it, I'm like, that is why you haven't talked for a while. I was so upset that I really hated the book, and therefore I've decided that I'm never going to even bother to read Book Lovers because I've seen a lot of mixed reviews, and happens to be all of the reviews that I saw that were negative were exactly the reasons why I don't like Emily Henry's books. Like, I'm not one of her lovers. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a fan of her, and I'm okay with that. And if you are a fan of her, then good for you. She is just not up my vibe. So yeah, that is my thoughts on Emily Henry. Also, a lot of people mentioned the Addicted / Calloway Sister series, which I feel like I don't even have to explain. That is one of my favorite series of all time. I'm so happy that it is on everybody's feeds all the freaking time because you should definitely read it. I absolutely love that series, and I will rave about it forever. Again, well, I mentioned this before, but the Off-Campus series did come up a lot, and I am a huge fan of that series as well. It is the first like sports romance series that I ever read, and it definitely is what put me on the path to read like those type of stories. So I will forever be grateful for The Deal by Elle Kennedy because that is my favorite series. That's my favorite book from the entire companion series, and also it's the first book that I read from the series. So like it has a very special place in my heart. I definitely recommend checking out the Off-Campus series and the Briar U companion series, even though not all of the books I loved equally. Like, I think that like book 1 and book 3 in the Off-Campus was my favorite, and then book 1 and book 2 from Briar U was my favorite. So book 1 was Fake Dating, book 3 was I Was a Player Until I Met You, book 1 from Briar U was Brothers Best Friends, and then book 2 from Briar U was Forbidden Romance. And those were my 4 favorites out of the 8 favorites. Like, some of the tropes just didn't work for me, and some of the books just like missed, like you either have a hit or a miss. Some of them definitely just like missed the mark for me. But in general, I'm a big fan of Off-Campus, so I definitely recommend checking it out if you have not already. A lot of people also mentioned the Ravenhood series, which again is one of my favorite series of all time. That series has like a literal like grip on my heart. Like, I will never forget about that series. I read it almost a year ago, and I feel like I read it before the hype started. So I kind of went into it with like 0 expectations. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I kind of knew nothing about it, and I'm just like, look, I've seen this here and there. Let me give it a shot and just like figure it out for myself. And I even made a reading vlog on it if you are interested in checking it out. I'll try to remember to have that linked down in the description below. But either way, I fell so freaking hard for that series. Like, I was completely captivated. I couldn't put it down. The first time that I read the series, I even read book 2 twice back to back. I read book 1, then I read book 2, then I read book 2 again, literally like, over that night. Like, I finished it at night, and then throughout the night, I didn't go to sleep, and I just did a reread of it. And then I jumped to book 3. And I definitely think that like book 3 was my least favorite from the entire series, but I also think that it was so important because like book 2 2 kind of like breaks your heart, and then book 3 kind of tries to like stitch it back together as best as it possibly can. So I thought that it was a really great ending. So overall, I highly recommend checking out the Ravenhood series. And I do understand why it's not for everybody. Like, it definitely will work for some people and not work for other people. But if it works for you, then it like really works for you. You know what I mean? So either way, thumbs up to the Ravenhood series by Kate Stewart. Next up, people said the Devil's Night series, which happens to be one of the series that is on my feed constantly. Like, this is one of the biggest like series that I see on my TikTok all the freaking time. And it happens to be, I love seeing the content for it, even though I wasn't a huge fan of the series. I liked book 1. Like, I was very captivated by the first book in this series. I was like, what is this story? Like, it is very weird, very twisted, but somehow extremely entertaining. And I was like all for it. I think I ended up giving it like a 4 or a 4.5 stars. And I feel like I still like hold to that. Like, I really did enjoy book 1 for what it was. But then I ended up moving on to book 2 and book 3. And for some reason, it completely lost its mark. Like, I felt like it kept trying to redo book 1. Like, all of the other stories kept trying to just like repeat the vibe of it, except like it just didn't hit the mark for me. So therefore, I ended up really not enjoying the rest of the series. And then I never ended up getting to the last book. But I still really enjoyed book 1. And I see why people like it, because it's very dark, very twisted, very like weird. But at the same time, like, it's very captivating and entertaining if you can handle Penelope Douglas's writing style. It's definitely not for everyone, and I'm kind of on the side of like, it's not for me. But I'm not gonna lie, I kind of enjoyed Corrupt, which was the first book in the series. So even though I hated it, I also simultaneously enjoyed it somehow. So yeah, that is my thoughts on the Devil's Night series. But I absolutely love seeing like all of the TikToks on it. Like, even though I didn't like Damon's book, I love seeing Kill Switch TikToks. Like, I don't know why, but it's got like a definite chokehold on me. So either way, that's my thoughts on the Devil's Night series. Next up, a lot of people also mentioned Twisted Love, like the Twisted Love series by, I think, Anna Hong. And I read the first book in this series, and I very much didn't like it. I feel like it was, I just thought about this now, but I feel like it was a bad version of like the Devil's Night series, even though that's such a bad comparison. But it kind of had like a very serious, very dark tone to it, while simultaneously trying to be like interesting, like normal rom-com. And I didn't really like the mix. Like, I felt like it was a little bit ridiculous at times, and also I found like the main girl to be like extremely childish, and in general it just like, it very much did not hit the mark for me. I very much hated the book, and I never ended up continuing on with the series, and I'm really not upset about that, because I did know that like book 2 is about like a princess and her bodyguard, and just the idea of like a princess being in like a general romance book that's not like a fantasy, I knew that that would not very much vibe for me. So I just like decided to give up on the series. So I didn't like book 1, never wanted to continue with the series. That is my thoughts on the Twisted Love, or Twisted, whatever the series is called, by Anna Hong. Another book that was very often talked about was The Love Hypothesis. So The Love Hypothesis, I read this book, I think a little bit too late in the game, because I kind of went into it being like, why is everybody loving this this book? I kind of should just check it out, because like it's all over my feed all the freaking time. And then I ended up being disappointed, because at the end of the day, I think that this book was just a very basic, nothing special rom-com. I don't think it was horrible, but I don't think that it necessarily like deserves the hype that it got, because I think that it was very mediocre. Like, people kept saying it was steamy. There was one steamy scene in it. Like, what are you guys reading to think that this book was steamy? And like, it was a fake dating book, but like, honestly, I feel like it was not even that heavy on the fake dates. Like, they went on one fake date a week. Like, I don't like books when the characters are not always interacting. And because this book was like a woman in STEM book, well, I don't know why I'm doing this. It really was a woman in STEM book. I feel like it was a little bit more on the woman's fiction side, with a side of fake dating and like, you know, everything along those lines. And therefore, I didn't really like it. Like, I like heavier romance books, and in my opinion, this was like not heavy enough for me. So I was disappointed by this book, but also it might have been because I read it a little bit too late, so I went into it with expectations, but we'll never really know. So that is my thought on it. I don't think that like, you know, you shouldn't read it. I don't think it's like the worst book in the world, but like, I also don't think that it like, I don't understand why people hype it up as much as they do. Like, oh my God, this was my favorite book of the year. Like, I don't see that, you know what I mean? But anyway, another book that people said that they see a lot is like The Hating Game and The Spanish Love Deception. And I was surprised that so many people had said The Hating Game, because honestly, I never see this book on my feed, even though I absolutely love the book. I'm a huge fan of The Hating Game. I did read it like very late into the game. Like, it is a very old book, and I read it, I don't know, like last year, 2 years ago, I don't even remember. But either way, I absolutely loved it when I read it. I think it was one of like the first enemies to lovers workplace environment books that I read. Like, I was just getting into romance, and this was one of the first that I came like across, and I fell so freaking hard for it. Like, I really did love it so freaking much. And then when I read The Spanish Love Deception, I felt like it was so similar that I loved it as well. And the thing is that I read The Spanish Love Deception before it was hyped up. So I read it going into it with like no expectations. I'm just like, one person told me that like, oh, you liked The Hating Game? Read The Spanish Love Deception, because it's that, except it also has a little bit of fake dating going on. And I read it and I absolutely loved it. I gave it like an easy 5 out of 5 stars. But then as people started reading it, and as I started seeing a lot of more reviews on it, I realized what people were saying when they gave it a negative review. Like, some people were like, oh, it was way too long, or oh, like, you know, I don't know. There was just like reviews that I saw about it, and I'm like, I kind of hear what you're saying, but at the time, I didn't think that. So my thoughts on it is that I see why The Spanish Love Deception does not work for a lot of people, but I read it at the perfect time for me, and therefore I kind of liked it when I read it. You know what I mean? I don't know how I'd feel about it if I did a reread, and that's kind of one reason why I've been trying not to do a reread, because I'm a little bit nervous that my feelings on it would like go downhill, especially because I now have all of these negative reviews in my head for it. But either way, I liked it when I read it. That is my thoughts on it. Next up, a lot of people also said it happened one summer / hook, line, and sinker, and that is by Tessa Bailey. So I had one time read Tools of Engagement by Tessa Bailey, and I really hated the book. It did not vibe with me whatsoever, and that is kind of why I decided that I just didn't really want to bother with It Happened One Summer / hook, line, and sinker, even though I feel like it would be a fine time, except I have been really falling out of regularly published contemporary romance books, and therefore I'm a little bit nervous to pick this up, because I don't think it's going to hit me the same way that it's hitting everybody else. I just think I'm going to go into it, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, everybody absolutely loved this book, so like, what are they seeing in it? And I feel like I'll end up being disappointed. And it's kind of really hard to like switch your brain off on that, you know? Like, it's kind of hard to be like, well, I know that this is popular, but let's go into it with zero expectations, because like it might not live up to the hype. Like, you can say that, but are you actually going to do that? I don't know. And therefore I feel like maybe one day I'll try it, like maybe, but really I have like no pull towards it, because I really didn't like the first book that I read by this series, even though I know a lot of people said that like these books are way better than the Tools of Engagement series, but like still, it's how I feel, you know? But either way, there were a couple more that people had talked about, but let's just do one more. So a lot of people also mentioned Things We Never Got Over, which is by Lucy Score. And I did read this book and I kind of enjoyed it, but I don't see why people think that it's like the best book of the year. Like, I definitely thought it was a little bit too thick. And I did think that like everything that happened at the end was a little bit like, okay, whatever. Like the whole thing with her twin sister, I'm not really gonna give away any spoilers, but like, I didn't really like the ending part of it. Like it was okay for me. It was an okay read. Like, it did check off a lot of boxes. It was a grumpy sunshine. It was a small town romance. It was a single parent. Like, there was a lot of solid elements going on to the book. So I see why people like it. But personally, for me, it definitely like missed the mark. And I think I ended up giving it like a 3, maybe a 3.25, because like it wasn't a horrible book, but there was a lot about it that I feel like I could complain about. So yeah, that is the ending of my popular books on TikTok / Instagram and my opinions on them. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I'd love to hear your opinions on any of these books. So feel free to leave me a comment down below and we can continue this conversation there. But either way, if you enjoyed watching this, then please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel and hit that notification button so that you can get notified when my part 2 of this video comes out. And either way, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. And until next time, enjoy reading.